Black Friday has started on Boosty. Up to 60% discount on subscription levels. Hurry up to buy at such a great price. Link in the description. Enjoy watching, everyone. Description: for the invention of the Edo Tensei technique, the Shinigami decided to punish Tobirama Senju. However, his older brother, Hashirama, took all the blame and punishment upon himself. Now he must return to the world of the living and take care of Uzumaki Naruko, who is his grandniece. How will life turn out, girls, if the first Hokage is raising her? And then Mokutan awakened. Chapter 1: How it all began. A handsome man with dark hair pulled back sat cross-legged and looked at the square field where the battle was unfolding. Opposite him sat a man with silver-white hair. Unlike his brother, his hair was short and tousled, and his eyes were crimson, while his brother's were dark as night. The two were dressed strangely. The albino had a steel protector on his forehead with a spiral, one end of which curved upward, and a triangle was attached to it on the left. Both were dressed in black turtlenecks and black trousers, and their knees were wrapped in bandages. On their feet, the men had open sandals. Over all this clothing, both wore metal armor plates, dark blue for the crimson-eyed man and red for the dark-haired man. This armor covered the chest, shoulders, and hips. And the albino's collar of the armor was trimmed with snow-white fur. At the moment, they were both sitting in a cool room of a small house and playing shogi. Hashirama, that was the name of the black-eyed brunette, was losing to his brother all the time. But Tobirama, that was the name of Hashirama's brother with silver-white hair and crimson eyes, looked at his brother's losses with some pride. And why not? To beat the god of the shinobi world himself in shogi. Although this was not surprising. Unlike the cold and reasonable Tobirama, who thinks through every step and was called one of the best strategists, Hashirama was too impulsive and often succumbed to emotions, but this did not prevent him from becoming the first Hokage. In any case, it was a long time ago. At the moment, Shodai and Naidame Hokage are dead. But if they are dead, then how can they play shogi? It's simple. At the moment, they are in the interworld, a bridge between the world of the dead and the world of the living. The interworld is a completely white space where everything you could wish for appears, within reasonable limits, of course. It was to this interworld that someone had sent them. They didn't know who, but they could guess. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Hashirama stood up, walked up to it, and opened it. A Shinigami stood on the threshold, a translucent spirit with horns, dressed in some kind of robe. A Shinigami is a creature that sees the future and the past. In other words, the god of death. The first Hokage politely let him into the house, and he floated into the room where the second Hokage was sitting, who immediately stood up. "Hello?" the Shinigami said dully, revealing his sharp teeth. Both brothers bowed in greeting. "As you understand, I am here for a reason. Second Hokage Tobirama Senju, you have been sentenced and will be punished." "Sentence? Punished? For what?" The albino frowned. "So what did my brother do this time?" Senju Sr. asked. "Oh, shut up, will you? Can't you see, this is a serious conversation?" Tobirama cut his brother off, causing him to wilt. "For creating the Edo Tensei technique," the Shinigami continued calmly, "you are sentenced to exile in the world of the living and the education of Uzumaki Naruko." "What? I'm going to educate some girl? No way!" Senju Jr. chuckled. "The sentence is not subject to appeal. You must be punished." The Shinigami shook his head. "And why this girl? And what's so bad about my technique?" Naidame resisted. "The fact that your technique can resurrect the dead is already outrageous. The dead cannot be disturbed. And the fact that in the future it will be used to kill many other shinobi, think for yourself how bad it is. But I told you that you don't need to create it, and you, my stupid little brother, didn't listen to your elders." Hashirama sneered again, having come to life. "I said keep quiet." Tobirama shouted at his brother and turned to the Shinigami again. "And what about the murders and the child?" "You will find out about the murders yourself, but the child. This is the child from the prophecy once given by my old friend Rikudo Sennin. She is the reincarnation of Ashura, just as Hashirama was in his time. You will be obliged to train her, raise her, and look after her. And Kami-sama forbid, something happens to her, and she dies before she gets old, a terrible fate awaits you. But I don't know how to get along with children at all. The nine-dame Hokage was confused. It's okay. You'll manage. And remember, if you die before your time, you will experience all the torments of hell several times over. Hashirama thought about it. Of course, the Shinigami was right. Tobirama had done wrong and should be punished, but looking after a little girl was too much for a Senju. Of course, the nine-dame was the Hokage, he ruled an entire village, but a child. That was too much responsibility. No, of course, no one claims that Tobirama is irresponsible, quite the opposite. He is too responsible and correct. He had never interacted with children, and he himself grew up too early. The war that killed many shinobi had an effect. He would not understand what a child is and how to look after one. He could lose his temper at any moment, be rude and cause unnecessary tears. The insight came unexpectedly. Maybe someone else could take responsibility for what he had done and bear this punishment. Hashirama asked. Yes. Anyone can do this, if they can find a pretext for which they are to blame, and not the accused. The Shinigami nodded. Then I want to take full responsibility for creating the technique and am ready to be punished. The elder Senju bowed his head. But, Hashirama, Tobirama wanted to object. This is my fault. After all, if I had tried to dissuade you more actively back then, Hashirama began. How much more actively could I have? The younger Senju sighed quietly, remembering how his brother had jumped around him all day long, saying, Don't you dare do that. Then you wouldn't have created this technique, Hashirama continued as if nothing had happened. Moreover, you don't know how to get along with children. And you're a big child, Tobirama snapped. I accept your words, the Shinigami nodded. From now on, you, the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, will be punished for not being able to dissuade your brother from creating the Edo Tensei technique and its consequences. You will take care of the girl named Naruko Uzumaki. And you will receive all the rest of the information when you find yourself in the world of the living, the Shinigami announced. The first's eyes darkened, and he felt himself falling into darkness. Chapter 2 Uzumaki Naruko. A dark funnel opened in the middle of the forest, and a man flew out of it. Letting out a painful groan, he rose to his feet and began to slowly look around. So where am I? He asked the question into the void. You're on the border with Konoha. The Shinigami he already knew appeared next to Hashirama. So my village still exists? Senju jumped up happily, clapping his hands. Yes. It will exist for another 100 years if you calm down now and follow me. Hashirama suddenly calmed down, although his inner voice squealed like a girl, and his eyes sparkled. Your task is to protect Uzumaki Naruko. She lives in Konoha and is the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed demon fox. You will have to protect her and train her for several years. Once she turns 15, you will return to the netherworld. Her elements are lightning, earth, and water. In the future, her Mokutan should awaken. I think you know what to do with it. Yes, but how will I find her? Oh, it's easy. Shinigami snapped his fingers and a small screen appeared next to him. The screen showed a 6-year-old girl with wheat-colored hair. Her eyes were blue, like the sky, and they looked with delight and joy. 6 stripes on her cheeks, 3 on each, made her look like a fox. Her small hands were clenched into fists, and her cheeks were puffed out. This is your ward. Now we will go to the village, and you will see her in real life. Okay. The first nodded his head. Oh yeah? Change clothes. In Konoha, no one except Naruko herself and a couple of other people should know who you really are, Shinigami continued. Especially since they don't wear clothes like that now. Yes. But what? Shinigami snapped his fingers and a gray backpack appeared next to Shodame. Opening it, Hashirama discovered clothes lying there. He nodded gratefully. The man disappeared into the bushes and soon returned dressed in the standard Konoha ANBU uniform, black, slightly baggy pants, the same black high-collared, sleeveless jacket. Over the jacket he wore a gray vest, and on his hands were black elbow-length gloves and gray hand guards. Senju wore high boots with a long strap on his feet, and a short blade hung behind his back. Excellent. Now you're the spitting image of Konoha Anbu. You just need to hide your face, Shinigami muttered. The next second, a porcelain mask with a deer's face sank into the first Hokage's face. With a satisfied grin, Shinigami slowly swam towards Konoha, leaving Hashirama, who was trying to take off this terribly uncomfortable mask, behind. Noticing that his companion had practically disappeared from sight, Shodame hurried after him. I wonder if Konoha has changed? It must have become more beautiful and bigger. And who is our Hokage now? Senju thought along the way. Finally, a huge open gate with green wooden walls and the kanji, "Welcome to Konoha," appeared ahead. Apart from you, no one sees me, Shinigami said. Act naturally. Having passed through the gate, the first saw Izumo and Kotetsu, who were always sitting there and celebrating the arrival of this or that person. Izumo was a shinobi with long brown hair. Part of his hair completely covered his right eye. Izumo had a blue hat with his native village's protector sewn into it. Izumo himself was dressed in the standard Konohagakure clothing, consisting of a green chunin vest. The vest had 2 pockets for storing scrolls, kunai, and various medical devices. Next to him sat Kotetsu, a guy with dark hair that always stood up straight and resembled a porcupine. He had some kind of strange bandage on the bridge of his nose. Having passed these young shinobi, who looked to be 19 to 20 years old, without hindrance, Shodame went deeper into the village. They let me through, apparently, because I'm dressed like Anbu, and there shouldn't be any complaints about them upon entry. Or maybe Shinigami did something to them, thought Senju. When the 2 companions from the netherworld reached the high pole, Shinigami said, "You can climb up and see how your village has changed." Hashirama nodded and nimbly climbed up the lamppost. He looked around the village and whistled. What he saw bore little resemblance to the old village of his time. There were a lot of houses now. People scurried back and forth everywhere, like gnats around a lamppost at night. There were benches, stores, bars, and hotels all around. The village area had become 2 or 3 times larger than it had been 100 years ago. A mountain with 4 carved faces towered over the village. Hashirama recognized all of them except the last one. The first face belonged to him, the second to Tobirama. Even on the rock, he looked sullen. The third face belonged to the younger Senju's student, Saratobi Hiruzen. But the fourth face with hair tousled like a hedgehog and kind eyes is unknown to whom. Smiling, Shodame climbed down from the pole and approached Shinigami, who was grinning. Now let's go find Uzumaki Naruko. She should be at home. But as it turned out, the house, or rather Naruko's one-room apartment, was empty. Having examined the girl's place of residence, Hashirama came to the conclusion that she lived poorly. This was evidenced by the large amount of custard noodles and milk packs in the refrigerator. Let's go wait for her outside, Shinigami suggested, seeping through the door. Senju nodded and left the girl's apartment. Standing not far from the house, he began to wait. Not even 5 minutes had passed when someone's screams and crying were heard. Jumping up from his place, Shodame Hokage hurried towards the sounds and was stunned. In front of him, 5 healthy men had cornered a 6-year-old girl and were beating her. But the most surprising thing was that no one was rushing to help her. On the contrary, everyone was just grinning evilly and passing by. Hashirama jumped up to the 5 shinobi and easily pushed them away from the golden-haired girl. They wanted to attack him, but the first deftly knocked them all out and approached the girl who was huddled in a ball. "How are you?" he asked quietly, bending over her. The girl looked up at Hashirama with her tear-stained blue eyes, in which surprise and fear were read. "This is your ward. Take care of her," said Shinigami and disappeared. Easily lifting the girl in his arms, he carried her to her apartment and laid her on the bed, beginning to examine her. Her body was covered in abrasions and bruises. Shodame frowned and began to heal the girl, when he suddenly felt a familiar evil chakra. "QB! W, who are you? Why are you helping me? The golden-haired girl asked in a hoarse voice. I am the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, and I have come to the world of the living to teach you the art of shinobi. Shodaime smiled and took off his mask. Chapter 3, Academy. A year has passed since that day. Naruko did not immediately believe Hashirama's words and chuckled for a long time when he claimed that he was Shodaime. However, over time, Senju was able to prove his words. Now they became like brother and sister to each other. Naruko herself grew up and became stronger. Now she could hit a kunai right on target. She could sense chakra and use such simple techniques as replacement and reincarnation. Uzumaki became more resilient. And all thanks to Hashirama, the first Hokage, sent to the world of the living with the help of the Shinigami, taught the girl elementary techniques, organized training and took care of her. Of course, the allowance given to orphans was small for Naruko. Therefore, Hashirama decided to hide his true face and with the help of a special genjutsu of the Senju clan, made the third and the others think that he was an ordinary ANBU who was ordered to look after the Jinchuriki. He lived on his salary. He tried to provide for Naruko, but the girl always refused and did not want to hang on his neck. But the retired Hokage had to live in Naruko's one-room apartment. The problem was that the girl had to be looked after so that she did not do anything new, and so that the residents did not harm her. The girl's day was scheduled by the hour. She got up early and went for a morning jog. After breakfast, she had breakfast and dragged Hashirama to another training session. And Senju himself did not resist. Naruko was like a younger sister to him, and looked like him when he was a child. And then they took a break for lunch and trained again. And so on until the evening. And after 7, Naruko had free time, when she rested or listened to Hashirama's stories. And at 10 she went to bed. And when Hashirama was on a mission, Uzumaki trained herself. She improved her chakra control and learned new techniques with the help of the scrolls that Senju left her. But today was a special day for Naruko. Today she was entering the Shinobi Academy. Very soon she would be one step closer to her goal of becoming Hokage. Where did she get such a dream? It's simple. Hashirama told her a lot about the times when he was Hokage. He told her how much work there was. He told her how he, his brother and Madara came up with new rules and laws. He told her how he was respected. And probably because of the last point, the girl decided to become the head of the village. All her life she has been hated and despised. She wants to prove to everyone that she is not like that. She dreams of being recognized, and the post of Hokage will help her with this. And most importantly, Hashirama believes in her when everyone else has turned away. Uzumaki got up as usual, that is, at 6 in the morning and went for a run and warm up. When she got home, she washed herself and made breakfast for Hashirama and her. Now she didn't eat custard noodles so often. If before she only had enough money for custard ramen and a carton of milk, now Senju finally persuaded her with the words. To become strong, you must eat well. And if you eat only ramen, you will be as frail as these noodles. Your money is not enough for normal food, so once a week I will go to the store under Henge and buy the products that we will eat. And you will learn to cook. And she learned. She dug up a cookbook in the library and learned. Sometimes Hashirama himself cooked, since after a particularly difficult training the girl was in pain to move for some time. And sometimes they cooked together. Usually on such days, loud laughter was heard from her one-room apartment. Hashirama was able to replace her parents, and became an older brother. Having prepared the cheese balls, the girl woke up the first, and they had breakfast together. The clock already showed 8:27, and she had to be at the academy by 9. Jumping up, the girl hurried to her room to change. Already at the threshold, Naruko looked at herself in the mirror. Golden hair with naturally red ends and a couple of red strands were combed into 2 mischievous ponytails. The bangs fell on blue eyes sparkling with joy. There were 6 stripes on her cheeks, 3 on each, which made her look like a little fox. And Uzumaki was dressed in a blue blouse with short sleeves, the Uzumaki clan crest on the back and a high collar, on which the Senju clan crest was visible on both sides. After all, Senju and Uzumaki are related, and if you take into account that Naruko's mother was Kushina Uzumaki, and her father was Minato Namikaze, whose grandmother was the second's wife, albeit not for long. They did not get along. During Naruko's training, the first felt a familiar and native chakra. After rummaging through the secret scrolls, he found out that this girl was his grandniece, so wearing these two signs was completely legal. The girl also had an orange skirt just above the knee, and on her feet were shinobi sandals, which Hashirama gave her for entering the academy. Smiling at her reflection, Naruko left the apartment, meeting Hashirama, who was dressed in an ANBU suit, and on his face was a mask in the form of an owl. Taking her great-grandfather by the hand, the girl walked through the village. The residents cast angry glances at her, but did not dare approach her. And all because of the ANBU walking next to her. Of course, they did not know that it was the first Hokage, but they were still afraid. One day, several Chunin, completely drunk, attacked the girl and began to beat her, but Senju immediately appeared and lightly beat them up so that they would not dare to attack the girl. Since then, the residents did not approach her, but continued to hate and fear her. A lot of people had already gathered in the courtyard of the academy. Naruko and Hashirama squeezed through this crowd and stood not far from some pink-haired girl. The third Hokage came out on a small dais and began to talk about the will of fire and the future generation. However, no one listened to him. The older ones because they knew these words by heart. And the younger ones too bored. They hurried to look at their future classmates. Since there were few people who wanted to become ninja, absolutely everyone was enrolled. To the right of Naruko stood a boy from the Aburame clan with his father. Both were wearing high-collared cloaks that covered half their faces and glasses. The first Hokage said that the Aburame clan uses beetles for their techniques, which, according to rumors, they keep in their own bodies. Not far away stood a boy from the Inuzuka clan next to what was probably his sister. Tattoos on their cheeks in the form of fangs. Hashirama talked a lot about this distinctive feature of the clan. Naruko's attention was drawn to a girl with lavender eyes and blue-black hair that resembled a Haim hairstyle. She is a Hyuga. Uzumaki whispered in Hashirama's ear, following where his ward was looking. The girl could not see the others. And finally, that pleasant moment of official enrollment arrived. The children approached the teacher after he called their name, and they were given a book with the history of the village, a scroll with the basics of the simplest techniques, and a chocolate bar. The children were called one by one. And finally, Uzumaki Naruko, Iruka-sensei said with disgust. The girl went up to the dais and took the gifts, casting a fleeting glance at the children and parents standing and looking at her. She heard how many whispered to their children that they should not go near this girl. This made her sad, but having come across Hashirama's confident and proud gaze, which was visible through the eye slits in the mask, the girl smiled radiantly and hurried to him. Soon everything was over and the children were sent to the classroom, where they would now have lessons. Good luck, Hashirama ruffled the girl's hair. I'm leaving on a mission today and won't be back until a week. Behave well and train. And find friends. Thank you. Bye, BMSH, Naruko smiled, turning around. BMSH? Senju asked again in surprise. God of the shinobi world, the girl deciphered and ran after her departing classmates. Bye, Hashirama whispered into the void and went to the Hokage for a mission. It sounds pretty funny. The Hokage went to the Hokage for a mission, but that's the only way it works here. Shinigami warned that no one should know him by sight yet, except for Naruko. Meanwhile, the girl ran into the classroom and sat down at the last desk by the window. No one wanted to sit next to her. Iruka-sensei entered the classroom and started telling about Konoha, about the first Hokage and so on. And the young Uzumaki closed her eyes and fell asleep. Their new sensei was telling their story in a very monotonous and boring way. There was none of the zest that there was when Hashirama told all this. The girl was woken up by the bell from the lesson. Yawning, she stretched and stood up. Taking the gifts in her hands, Naruko looked around the classroom and remembered Senju's words about friends. Jumping up to the pink-haired girl who was standing not far from Naruko during the enrollment. As it turned out later, this girl's name was Haruno Sakura. Hello? I'm NAR, Uzumaki began, but Haruno didn't even look in her direction. Sasuke-kun, where are you going now? The pink-haired girl chattered, jumping around the guy, who didn't notice her at all. I see. Naruko exhaled and walked away from Haruno. And yet the girl's class turned out to be strange. In any case, Naruko now had one goal to go to, Ichiraku Ramen, and go to training. Chapter 4: The Truth. Naruko is already 7. She is smart, resourceful, kind, strong, bright, and noisy. Every day Hashirama noticed more and more often that the girl is becoming like him. However, sometimes she turned into Tobirama. She became sullen, threw out his favorite phrases, and despite the fact that Senju is older, sometimes commanded. But fortunately such fits were very rare, which made the life of the first Hokage a little easier. Uzumaki was also terribly curious. She stuck her nose everywhere and in the evenings often asked Hashirama about this or that. Sometimes he did not even find the answers to her questions. Naruko was very noisy and active. She simply had nowhere to put her energy, so she often fooled around, joked. But most of all she loved to paint the faces of the Hokage, which were carved on the rock. I turned out to be kind of flat here, Hashirama always said, looking at his face. The villagers hated the girl, and only the Anbu walking next to her did not allow them to touch or insult her in any way. At first, there were such brave men who threw stones at her, but after almost a dozen flew in response from this mysterious Anbu, they stopped. The Hokage decided to assign additional surveillance to Naruko. He believed that one Anbu would not be enough. Therefore, after much thought, he decided to order Hatake Kakashi, an ash-haired man with a mask on half his face and a bandana covering one eye. He was a student of the 4th and a strong jonin to watch the girl. Hatake watched her for 3 weeks, until one day she noticed him. There was nothing else to do, and he had to get to know the girl. He liked Naruko. She looked like Kushina, had Minato's intelligence, but her character was a cross between the first Hokage and her mother. Over time, Naruko, Hashirama, and Kakashi became good friends and began to trust each other. Hatake turned out to be a man with an interesting and very painful past. He kept secrets well, so after a month of their friendship, Anbu and Naruko revealed their secret. The son of the White Fang, of course, did not believe it at first, but soon he was convinced of it himself by the shaky moments in his history filled with Senju, known to everyone, and by the element of wood. Now there were 3 of them. Uzumaki had huge problems with chakra. Because of the QB sealed in her, she could not use her chakra normally. It always turned out to be either too much or too little. However, Naruko was not upset. She studied Kenjutsu. For almost a year, Uzumaki begged Hashirama to teach her. He refused for a long time, but still could not resist. For her birthday, he gave her a plastic short blade for training. After all, Naruko was still too young for a real weapon and could get hurt, but a toy blade was just the thing. It was certainly lighter than a real one, but it couldn't hurt anyone. Something had to be done about taijutsu, too. The girl knew how to fight almost at the academy level, but no more. She tried hard, but nothing worked. Of course, Kakashi and Hashirama taught her some of their tricks, but the Uzumaki body was not trained enough for them. She was still weak. Senju and Hatake struggled for a long time with the question of how to help her. The answer came from an unexpected side. In all of Konoha, there was no better taijutsu master than my guy. At first, Kakashi refused to ask him for help, but Naruko and Hashirama persuaded him. Guy turned out to be an energetic, noisy, bright, and a little crazy person, but Naruko liked it. The green beast of Konoha understood her and began to treat her with kindness and gentleness from their first meeting. It seemed that he did not even know that she was the Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Yoko. So you are Naruko? Great! I see how the power of youth overflows you. This was the first thing Guy said when they first met. The girl was surprised and began to treat him with some caution, but soon he became like another older brother to her. Later, he also learned Hashirama's secret. One day, the Hokage entrusted Hashirama with delivering some secret scrolls to the Fireland daimyo. Shodai was supposed to leave on a mission the next morning, so after dinner, he hid the scrolls in his bag and went to bed. Naruko, driven by her usual curiosity, snuck into the kitchen with her backpack at night and began to read. To her surprise, the scrolls contained information only about her. As she read, her eyes widened, her mouth dropped open, and tears left wet tracks on her cheeks. In a sort of daze, she put the scrolls in her backpack and returned it to Hashirama, and went to the kitchen and made tea. Only after Uzumaki sat down on a chair and took a sip, everything that had been written fell upon her, and she began to cry quietly. Having calmed down, the girl finished her tea and went to bed. Tomorrow I need to ask the Hokage about everything, she decided. Chapter 5 Return of Property. The Hokage's residence had been open since early morning. The third Hokage was sitting at the table, smoking a pipe and talking to Uchiha Sasuke, who had become an orphan just a week ago. We'll give you a 3-room apartment near the center of the village. I don't think you'll want to live in your clan's mansion. Okay. Sasuke nodded. Your clan was the strongest in Konoha and had a large fortune, so you, as the last heir, have every right to manage the bank account. The third continued. I understand. As soon as Uchiha had time to say this, the door swung open, almost flying off its hinges. It was clearly kicked in. A 7-year-old girl with a shock of golden hair ran into the office and jumped up to the table without even looking at Sasuke. She had heard the entire conversation. At first, Uzumaki just wanted to talk to the Hokage, but after what she heard, something clicked in her head, and she gave in to her emotions. An Anbu with dark long hair flew in after her. Naruko? The Hokage raised his eyebrows in surprise. So that's how it is, huh? The girl said loudly, abruptly placing her palms on the table. So this Uchiha has a good house, a bank account from his parents, shared love and respect, and I have been lied to for so many years, hatred and a 1-room apartment infested with cockroaches in the worst neighborhood with alcoholic neighbors. There were tears in the girl's eyes. Naruko, Hashirama wanted to bring her to her senses. Shut up! Uzumaki shouted at him. Can't you see that this is a serious conversation? Hashirama shuddered. She looked an awful lot like Tobirama now. Meanwhile, Naruko looked angrily at the third. Why did you lie to me, old man? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Feed me lies? Why? What are you talking about? He continued to pretend to be the Sandaime. About my parents. About the 9 tails. Tears glistened in the girl's eyes. Why does this Uchiha get the best of everything? So what if he's from the strongest clan in Konoha? Or are you just giving him everything that belongs to him just because he saw his parents die and remembered it, and I don't? Listen, Naruko. Many shinobi died that day and your parents were among those whose bodies couldn't be identified, Hiruzen said calmly, although inside he was angry and confused. A lie, tears streamed down the girl's cheeks. My parents' bodies were identified at the very beginning. You know the truth yourself, but why are you lying? You could have at least told me what lives inside me instead of keeping silent for so many years. And I was still surprised why the villagers hate me so much. Naruto, the third, wanted to object. Why didn't you tell me that I'm from the Uzumaki clan? Why didn't you tell me that my parents were Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, aka the 4th Hokage? Why? The Yondaime didn't have children, the Sandaime started again. A lie. A vile lie from a crazy old man. She screamed and, taking out a scroll, opened it, and shoved it right under the Hokage's nose. According to this scroll, my parents had a house on the outskirts of the village. Having calmed down a little, she continued. There was a bank account, there were scrolls with their techniques. I demand that they give all this to me, as the direct heir, or I will release the Kyuubi. And I can do it. Okay, the Hokage said calmly and nodded imperceptibly. He wasn't going to give anything away. 5 ANBU members appeared in the room and tried to grab the girl, but were immediately knocked out. Naruko turned around and saw Hashirama making a single seal and smiled weakly at him. Okay. The Sandaime gritted his teeth. You'll get everything that belonged to your parents. Now you can go to the apartment and pack your things. I need to talk to Sasuke. Naruko straightened up proudly and left the office, followed by Hashirama. Naruko, Hashirama, and Kakashi were standing in a large, dusty mansion where the fourth Hokage and his wife had once lived. The first Hokage and the girl were looking at the house with interest, having given all their things to Hitaki, who was reading a book. He was not interested in what the house looked like for one reason only: he had been here often in the past. Finally, the two looked at everything and put things in the rooms. After that, Kakashi and Hashirama created several clones and, together with Naruko, went to wash the mansion, which was already large, and now seemed simply enormous. The friends finished only in the evening, and even then they were helped by the indefatigable guy, who considered it an excellent training. Uzumaki made tea and all four sat down at the kitchen table. The house was shining, the beds were made, fresh food was in the refrigerator, and things were laid out. Imbiyu put a block in Sasuke's memory. Now he doesn't remember how you burst into the residence and yelled at the Sandaime, Hashirama informed, and Kakashi and Guy looked at him in surprise. Senju had to tell everything. That night, the girl fell asleep blissfully on her new bed. It was unusual to sleep in a spacious room, but Naruko decided that she would get used to it. And on the nightstand in a golden frame stood a photograph of her parents, Kushina and Minato, smiling happily. Chapter 6: Kurama and Team 3. One more time! Senju exclaimed. Mokutan! Entwining trees! Uzumaki exclaimed, folding the seals of tiger, dog, and snake. 3 long wooden beams burst out of the ground, which suddenly entangled Hashirama's clone. Excellent! Well done! The perfect technique, Shodai smiled, looking at Uzumaki. And she was breathing heavily from fatigue. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, and her clothes were dirty. For 3 hours now, the girl had been honing a single technique. In the end, she brought it to a perfect state. Suddenly, Naruko's eyes closed, and she would have definitely fallen to the ground, but Senju managed to catch her. Yes, Naruko was exhausted. The girl woke up in some dark room. She began to curiously examine her new surroundings. Sand-colored walls with some curls everywhere. Torches on the walls, and the floor in water, which was completely imperceptible. Strange. Uzumaki was about to move towards a rather dark passage, when her attention was drawn to a noise from behind. She turned around and saw something like a huge gold-red cage. It was dark inside. Very dark. But she could see 2 huge red eyes with narrow black pupils glowing there. Suddenly the torches lit up brighter, and the darkness retreated. The girl saw that a huge red fox with 9 tails fluttering behind his back was sitting in the cage. Wow! She whispered enthusiastically. How big? Grr! Shut up, little one! The fox growled dully and his heavy paw fell next to the girl. How I want to kill you! It's a shame, if you die I'll die too. Wow! What claws! Naruto didn't even hear his words. And your tails? Are they soft? Can I touch them? Well, Paziazenka? She asked. The fox was overcome by a nervous tic. For the first time in his long life as a demon, he saw something like this. Some little girl asking to touch his tails. The great and terrible Kyuubi no Yoko. Impossible. Unthinkable. And while Kyuubi was lost in thought and shock, Uzumaki deftly climbed up his paw and reached one of the tails, stroking it with her palm. It really is soft, she smiled. What is your name? Kyuubi no Yoko, the fox croaked. What's your name? The girl asked discontentedly, climbing onto the back of his neck. Kurama, answered Kyuubi. And will you be friends with me, Kurama? The girl's eyes were shining with joy. And Kurama's jaw had long since met the floor with a dull thud. Yes, nodded the Ninetails, still in a state of shock. Hooray! The girl hugged him around the neck and suddenly Naruko disappeared. It will be interesting and unusual to be friends with her, he said into the void. She will change a lot in this world. I have no doubt. In the meantime, I'll sleep. Naruko opened her eyes and looked around. She was in the living room, a spacious room with a leather sofa, a large round table with a white tablecloth, a black TV, brown armchairs, and bright wallpaper. A small but very beautiful chandelier hung from the ceiling. There were a large number of photographs on the walls, mostly landscapes. "Are you awake yet?" Hatake asked, sitting next to the sofa where the girl was lying. The man was dressed in ANBU clothes. Apparently, he had just returned from a mission. Yes, she nodded, raising herself up on her elbows. "You know, it turns out that Kyubi lives inside me." "What? Where are you from?" Kakashi's eyes widened in fear. "He's so cute and fluffy. And his name is Kurama," Uzumaki continued. "We're friends now." "What?" The copy ninja's shock knew no bounds. 5 years later, the morning of the mansion's inhabitants began in a very peculiar way. Namely, with a loud cry, "Yes! The power of youth wins!" Guy flew into the dining room with a smile on half his face. "What happened?" Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Hokage-sama promised to give me his team," he said enthusiastically, and Uzumaki smiled brightly. "I'm so glad." She hugged her friend and teacher in one person. "Who will you train?" "They will give me Rock Lee, Hyuga Neji, and Takahashi Tenten," answered Mato. "Oh, I've heard of them. Neji is considered a genius. But Lee does not possess chakra," the blue-eyed girl said thoughtfully. "My power of youth will help him overcome this." "I have no doubt," smiled Hashirama. "And after you have students, we will continue our training, right?" A pleading gleam lit up Uzumaki's eyes. "Of course." Naruko liked training with Guy. Yes, he was a little strict. But he was a great friend and teacher. He trained Naruko in taijutsu, and now she could use Mokutan normally. The body was no longer overloaded and could easily withstand a large load. "And all thanks to might, so your first training will take place here," Guy said loudly. "There are only 4 people training here, but with you there will be 7. "Yes," Lee yelled joyfully. "Oh my God," Tenten whispered quietly, putting her hand to her face and saying with her whole appearance, "I don't know them." Suddenly, the ground under the feet of all 4 shook and someone's screams were heard. Powerful streams of chakra came from all directions. Someone's ki was in the air. "Doton! Landslide!" Someone's voice said in the distance, and earth poured down on the guys who had recently become genin. Yes, poured. Because it looked more like sand than a solid shell of earth. "Oh! They've already started." Guy smiled and hurried towards the battle. As soon as he appeared in full sight of the fighters, the battle instantly stopped. A 12-year-old girl with golden hair and bright blue eyes stood before the third team. She was dressed in orange shorts, a black tank top that revealed her tummy, and an orange jacket over it. On her feet were black shinobi sandals that Hashirama had given her for her 10th birthday. Next to her stood a man in ANBU clothing and mask. The only thing that stood out was her long, evenly cut hair. "Hello, Guy." Hashirama waved his hand at him. "Is this your team?" he asked, pointing at the 3 genin. They had only just managed to catch up with Guy-sensei and were looking with interest at what should have been a flat area of land. And, in theory, because now the whole place was dug up and looked simply terrifying. And Senju and Uzumaki were looking with interest at the genin who had arrived. The first to catch the eye was brunette, with pale skin and an indifferent look. He was wearing a khaki shirt, dark brown shorts, and blue shinobi sandals. For some reason, he also had bandages wrapped around his right arm and right leg. His eyes were a pleasant shade of lavender, typical of the Hyuga clan. Next stood a girl. She had large brown eyes and chestnut-colored hair, braided into 2 buns on the sides of her head. She was wearing a pink blouse with red trim and gold clasps, dark green baggy pants, and blue shinobi sandals. And next to Guy stood the 3rd member of the team, who looked eerily like his sensei. True, he was wearing a sleeveless shirt with a head protector, and his hair was tousled at the back of his head, but the resemblance between the two was striking. At least with your eyes and eyebrows. "Ah! Naruko, dear, I knew I'd meet you here. Meet my team, Rock Lee, Hyuga Neji, and Takahashi Tenten. They, like you, are filled with the indomitable power of youth, Mato said enthusiastically, squeezing all three of them in a bear hug. Nice to meet you. I'm Uzumaki Naruko, the girl smiled, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. We're going to train now, Mato said, letting the students go. Oh, Naruko hesitated, looking at the suffering of the two genin, because only Lee was in seventh heaven. I guess I'll go so as not to bother you. No, Naruko, you'll never bother us. Guy flashed a smile, literally. Continue your training with the deer, and in the meantime we'll run 100 laps around this training ground. Might exclaimed, starting to run first. His students had to catch up with him, and Hashirama and Uzumaki decided to take a break. While Senju was restoring the soil, the girl poured tea into small cups and told him about the classes at the academy, not forgetting to mention the Uchiha that infuriated her, because of whom she can't make friends with any girl, because all the girls run after him. Except for Naruko herself and Hinata. But the latter is too shy. Do you go to classes for girls? Hashirama asked, taking off his mask and sitting down next to his protege. No, she shook her head. Why? To be able to make this stupid herbarium? As if we're going to give our opponents flowers on missions. These classes are still very important. Senju frowned. Oh yes, I had enough of your etiquette, which you and Kakashi had been cramming into me for so many years, the girl winced. She didn't like all of this. Especially etiquette. No, of course it was important and all that, but it wasn't for Naruto. She could become nice at some moments and follow the rules of decency and behavior in society. But it got boring for her. Bowing to everyone in a row, her back got tired. Wearing a kimono with a 2-kilogram belt asterisk was uncomfortable. Shoes were terribly squeezing her feet. All these hairstyles that took an hour to do for each one were irritating. Giving compliments to terrible people was disgusting and unpleasant. Remembering things as they are was terribly inconvenient. Behaving quietly and peacefully until you are called for a girl was the same as being a dog and wagging its tail in front of its owner. Sometimes Uzumaki thought that her brain would explode from all of this. I won't give up, Senju shook his head, hinting that he would still make the girl go to classes for girls. I won't give up either, she cheerfully sparkled her eyes, challenging Hashirama. Okay, I have to go, Senju said after a while, putting the cup on the tree trunk and standing up. See you later. And he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruko only snorted, taking another sip. After some time, the third team returned. Sweaty and tired if you don't count Guy. Still, Might had chased them away well. And this is only the beginning of the warm-up. Would you like some jasmine tea before we start the second part of the warm-up? Uzumaki smiled sweetly, watching as Tenten and Neji shuddered slightly. I wouldn't mind. Lee jumped up to her, taking the cup of hot drink from her hands. Taking a sip, he smiled, very tasty. I'm glad, Naruko smiled sweetly. Do you want some tea? Go ahead, Takahashi nodded and took the cup from the girl's hands. Okay, I'll try, Hyuga muttered, also taking the tea. The beginning of a long friendship was laid. Chapter 7 Sparring with Neji. No, you're not, Naruko exclaimed. Yes, you are, Tenten answered her. Yes. No. Yes. No. Yes. I'm older and you should listen to me. No. You're a stupid old woman. This argument had been going on for about 5 minutes already. The poor saleswoman, standing next to the two girls, didn't know what to do. Should she listen to the dark-haired girl with 2 buns on her head, or the fair-haired demon? And here's the thing. During another sparring with Neji, Lee managed to break his arm. And now the poor boy is lying in the hospital, languishing from boredom. Of course, he could have immediately run away from there and continued training, but Guy, who knew the student's character, got restraining seals from somewhere and attached them to the patient's bed. Now Rock could only move on the bed. An invisible barrier did not let him go beyond it. And Naruko and Tenten, like true friends, decided to visit Lee and bring him flowers. But what kind? Uzumaki wanted violets, and Takahashi insisted on lilies of the valley. And they couldn't come to an agreement. Violets, period. Naruko stamped her foot. Lilies of the valley and an exclamation mark. Takahashi didn't give in. Violets and 3 exclamation marks. The blue-eyed girl continued the argument. Lilies of the valley and 100 exclamation marks. It seemed like smoke was about to come out of the girl's ears. Violets! Neji, tell her! The girl turned to Hyuga for help. He twitched. His brick face disappeared for a second. However, only for a second. Exactly, Neji, tell her that we'll buy lilies of the valley. The second girl looked at him. What does this have to do with me? I don't care, the boy said coldly. What does that have to do with me? Uzumaki was genuinely surprised. It was because of you that Lee ended up in the hospital. So what? It's his own fault. I told him that he was too weak an opponent for me. But he didn't listen and went anyway. So it had nothing to do with me, he shrugged. How dare you? Naruko flared up. Your comrade is in the hospital now, and you don't care. Yes, Neji nodded, agreeing that he didn't care. You! Naruko wanted to slap him on the back of the head for such behavior, but Hyuga intercepted her hand. Don't try to hit me. You're weaker than Lee. You can't handle me. Do you want to test it? Naruko hissed, pulling her hand out of his grip. Today at 3 o'clock at our training ground, Neji set the time. I'll be waiting. She proudly turned around and, forgetting about the flowers, left the store. And you're just in time, Hyuga grinned, watching Naruko approach the training ground. I thought you'd be late. I'm only late for the academy, she replied, standing opposite Hyuga. How should we fight? At full strength, or can I use half strength? At full strength. I'm not going to stand on ceremony with you. Hyuga activated the Byakugan and got into a fighting stance. Suddenly, the blonde threw shurikens, but the boy easily parried them, grinning. I'll wipe that grin off your face. Uzumaki hissed, rushing at Neji. A frontal attack? How stupid and primitive. Hyuga dodged. He put 3 fingers together, thumb, index and middle, and hit Naruko on the arm with them. She hissed and jumped back. Lifting the sleeve of her jacket, she saw a bruise. The first Hokage's student cursed under her breath, which made Kurama lose his temper, since the girl's vocabulary turned out to be large. I'll have to apply ice again. Uzumaki thought at the end of her tirade and rushed into battle again. Then came a series of blows from the girl, but Hyuga blocked them, waiting for the right moment to attack. Neji suddenly twisted and hit her somewhere near the heart. Damn it! With this cry, the girl flew away from him, holding on to the place where Hyuga's blow landed. Spitting out blood, she looked at the boy. Stop pretending. Fight me with all your might. Neji's eyes flashed. You asked for it, she grinned wryly. But don't whine later that I beat you. Who's going to beat who next? Neji grinned, watching Uzumaki's actions. Uzumaki placed her feet shoulder-width apart, bent her knees slightly, narrowed her eyes and began to form seals with great speed. Horse, dog, bird, bull, snake. Doton. Earth dragon technique. Cracks appeared on the ground they were standing on, and a huge dragon burst out of it. Growling, the earth beast pounced on Hyuga, who jumped to the side, doing a somersault. But as soon as his feet touched the ground, his butt got to know it better. The earth dragon used its tail and knocked Neji off his feet. Growling, the beast opened its mouth and pounced on the boy. Hyuga stood up abruptly, from which his vision darkened for a moment. However, he, not allowing the darkness to dissipate, quickly spun around his axis, creating a dome of chakra. Kaiten! He said the name of the technique. The earth dragon collided sharply with the enemy's technique and pieces of earth flew in all directions. Naruko looked at Neji in surprise. She knew that there were 2 branches of the Hyuga clan, the main and the side. A special suppressive seal was applied to the forehead of the clan representatives from the side branch. It looked like a cross and was light green in color. Naruko saw this seal on Neji's forehead a couple of times when during training he sometimes took off his bandana with the Konoha sign. Kaiten was considered a technique of the main branch, and the fact that someone from the side branch could learn it was impossible. However, Neji used Kaiten right before her eyes. I wonder how he learned this technique? Uzumaki asked mentally, making a note to ask Neji himself about it later. Now it's my turn to attack. The boy suddenly jumped up to her. 64 heavenly strikes! He began to hit Uzumaki on the points. 2 strikes. 4 strikes. 8 strikes. He began to count the number of strikes he dealt the girl. 16 strikes. 32 strikes. 64 strikes. Naruko flew away from Neji and crashed back into a tree. She was breathing heavily. An unfamiliar weakness overcame her body. Her muscles went numb, and her chakra began to move no faster than a snail. Taking a deep breath, Naruko held it to make it easier to gather her will into a fist. On shaky legs, Uzumaki rose and firmly grabbed the tree with her hand. Only now did she exhale and look at the Hyuga. Why did you get up? He raised an eyebrow in surprise. You lost. Accept it. Accept? No way. She glared at him angrily. I will never accept my fate. And if I am destined to accept it, then I will change my fate. You're stupid, Hyuga looked at Naruto with disdain. You can't change fate. I'm destined to win against you. And you're destined to lose to me. And that can't be changed. All your channels are blocked, and you simply don't have enough chakra to uncork them. So all I have to do is send chakra through the channels? How simple! In an instant, Uzumaki found herself in her subconscious. With a quick step, she headed towards the gold-red cage of the nine-tailed fox. The fox was lying, propping his head up with his paws. Kurama, give me chakra, the girl asked. What, can't you defeat this boy with yours? The fox grinned. Kurama! Naruko folded her arms across her chest. Okay, here you go. Kyubi sent his orange chakra through the Uzumaki's channels. Neji watched in surprise as the alien orange poisonous chakra flowed through Naruko's clogged channels. For a moment, he thought he saw a huge fox with 9 tails and a crooked grin. Now you've definitely lost. With these words, Naruko began to fold 5 seals, snake, rat, dragon, dog, and tiger. Mokutan. Binding nest technique. The ground cracked under Neji's feet, and a couple of thin wooden rods burst out from there, which immediately began to expand and entangle the Hyuga. The remaining wooden rods followed these too. Soon the representative of the side branch was tied inside a huge tree, from which only his head and left knee stuck out. It's useless. This tree sucks out all your chakra. Naruko approached Hyuga, leaning her back against the trunk next to Neji's head. But how? Your chakra was running low. I blocked all your channels and your source of chakra. He looked at the blue-eyed girl in surprise. And you thought that I only had one source of chakra? Oh no, my friend. Naruko smiled. Since my birth, I have had one lodger. My personal schizophrenia, best friend and second source of chakra. And where did you get Mokutan? It was only the first Hokage. I know. The tree suddenly disappeared, and Neji fell to the ground. Unable to move, he no longer had chakra, but I am the second's great-granddaughter. She sat down next to Hyuga. But this is a secret. In time, you will find out everything. In the meantime, I will help you get to the hospital. Chapter 8 Team 7. Naruko opened her eyes abruptly, as if from a jolt. A sticky fear was spreading inside her. The girl looked around with eyes wild with fear. Finally, it dawned on her that she was in her cozy little room. Everything was fine. Naruko stood up and went to the bathroom, washing away her fatigue with cold water. It was strange. She had been sleeping, but for some reason she was terribly tired. Uzumaki remembered that she had a terrible nightmare, but she didn't remember anything from it. Only the grinding of metal and blood. Shaking her head, the blue-eyed girl got out of the bathroom and went to her room, casting a fleeting glance at her watch. She was dumbfounded, and then began to rush around the room like crazy. She was late. The distribution would start in half an hour, and she had about 20 minutes to walk quickly to the academy. Quickly putting on her usual shinobi clothes, a black top, orange shorts, and an orange-blue jacket, she quickly braided 2 high ponytails, put on her right hand a blue unremarkable bracelet that Kakashi gave her for her birthday, and tied a protector with the Konoha sign around her neck. Yesterday, she simply passed the exam brilliantly. The girl opened the window and jumped out, jumping to the ground from the 2nd floor. That's right, doors are for weaklings, Fox sarcastically commented in Naruko's subconscious. Rushing along the roads, which were, as luck would have it, clogged with people, Naruko managed to curse about 30 times. Something always goes wrong. Jumping onto the roof of the house, the girl rushed at full speed. Fortunately, after training with Guy, she had high speed and quick reactions. Running into the classroom 5 minutes before the bell, she plopped down on the first empty seat, which turned out to be next to Kiba Inuzuka, and began to wait. Soon Iruka-sensei came and began to announce the lists of teams. Uzumaki just yawned, covering her mouth with her hand, and lay down on the desk, waiting for the end of the distribution. She knew who she would be on the team with and who her mentor was. Kakashi told her yesterday. By the way, he, like Hashirama and Guy, lives in the Uzumaki mansion. Team number 7, Uzumaki Naruko, Uchiha Sasuke, and Harino Sakura. Mentor Kakashi Hatake, Iruka announced. When suddenly Sakura's loud and joyful cry drowned out his next words. Naruko looked at her teammate and saw how she turned around and stuck her tongue out at Ino, a blue-eyed blonde with a strange bang covering one eye. Ahem, Sakura, may I continue? Yumino asked, coughing delicately. Oh yes, of course, the pink-haired girl blushed and sat down. 15 minutes later, Iruka finally finished his speech and left the class, leaving the students to wait for their new teachers. Some came right away, while others were late. But Kakashi, who had not shown up for 3 hours, broke all records. So where is he? The senseis of the other teams have already arrived. Haruno was indignant, pacing from side to side. Calm down, Naruko yawned. She sat at her desk, resting her cheek on her hand and yawning all the time. Naruko did not get enough sleep because she finished training late yesterday. But Kurama warned her. But no, Uzumaki's stubbornness did not allow her to listen to him. Here I am. The door opened and Kakashi entered the classroom. Sorry for being late, I just got lost on the road of life. Kakashi scratched the back of his head. Naruto rolled her eyes. Okay, let's go meet each other on the roof. Soon the whole team was sitting on the roof. The newly minted genin were sitting on the steps of the roof, and Hatake was standing facing them, leaning against the metal fence. Well, let's get acquainted. Tell me about yourself. What you like, what you don't like, your hobby and dream. And show us an example, asked Haruno. Good. My name is Kakashi Hatake. What I like and don't like is none of your business. My life is long, I'll just say that I'm a jounin. Hobbies are none of your business, dreams are personal. Now you, he nodded towards Sakura. My name is Harino Sakura. I love. My dream. My hobby. After each word, she glanced at Sasuke and blushed. And what don't you like? Hatake sighed. I hate Naruko. The pink-haired girl blurted out. Hatake realized that he would definitely have to sweat with this girl. And Uzumaki herself looked at her in surprise. Why hate her? She didn't do anything like that to Sakura. She didn't even approach her. Strange. Next, the ash-haired man nodded towards Sasuke. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I like few things. I don't like almost everything. My hobby is training. I don't have a dream, only a goal to kill one person, he said coldly. Yeah. Next, Hatake nodded. I am Uzumaki Naruko. I love my friends. The girl closed her eyes. My hobby is training. And my dream is to become Hokage, surpassing Hashirama Senju in strength and dressing Kakashi in green tights. She smiled brightly, and Hatake shuddered. Excellent. So we have met. We meet tomorrow at the 4th training ground at 8 in the morning. You will pass the genin exam. Hatake made an eye smile. But we passed it at the academy, Sakura was surprised. And this is my personal test. Whoever fails will be sent back to the academy, Hatake sighed. And I advise you not to have breakfast. Otherwise, you will throw up, he finished bloodthirstily. There was silence. Excellent! Naruko exclaimed. And now you are coming with me and you will report to Guy yourself for my lateness. And then you will run an extra 300 laps with me. And under the dumbfounded looks of her teammates, Naruko grabbed the ash-haired man by the hand, pulling him forward. He fell to the ground and his mortal body was immediately dragged somewhere along the ground, raising clouds of dust. This is the power of the Etir God, Haruno whispered in bewilderment. Chapter 9 Kakashi's Test. Kakashi, my eternal rival, you're late, so I challenge you to a competition. Guy yelled happily, seeing Uzumaki and Hatake approaching. Oh no, the ash-haired one whispered quietly and tried to run away, but Naruko grabbed him by the collar of the green Jonin vest in time. It's time to pay for everything. She smiled bloodthirstily, looking at the useless attempts of the Sharingan carrier to break free. Kakashi could not use the replacement technique, since the girl blocked his chakra with the help of the Uzumaki clan's Fuinjutsu. Oh yes! When the girl was 9 or 10 years old, she visited the library, where they managed to find a forbidden section that was reliably hidden. She got there at night and by the light of a flashlight found books with the Uzumaki clan's Fuinjutsu. She took some home and taught them. Naturally, the Fuinjutsu in the books and scrolls there were the most basic, but that was enough for now. In 3 years, Naruko successfully learned everything and now actively used them, because they helped make life a little easier. For example, a special seal appeared on the girl's shoulder, where the weapon was stored. Another seal helped block the enemy's chakra, but this had to be done in contact with his skin, which was almost impossible during a fight. Another seal helped keep Uzumaki's secrets a secret. On all her friends who knew about Kurama and Hashirama, namely Guy, Tenten, Lee, Neji and Kakashi, she put a special seal that did not allow them to tell more about her than the Third and Society knew. And the Third and Society knew little. During her training, Naruko showed herself to be weak, not revealing the truth and true strength. To everyone, she was a stupid girl with blue eyes who couldn't do anything. So now Hatake could only follow her, shuddering at the thought of another competition with Guy. Here we are! Naruko shouted cheerfully and waved to the third team. Neji and Lee looked up from their sparring and waved back. Tenten happily jumped up from the ground and rushed to hug her friend. After all, they hadn't seen each other for about a week because of the C-rank mission. You're late because the power of youth is seething inside you, Guy said loudly. Naruko didn't find any logic in linking being late and the power of youth, but she decided to remain silent. Mato stood with his right fist raised to chest level, his lips pursed and his eyes closed. Manly tears were streaming down his cheeks. His whole appearance spoke of how proud and happy he was for his friends. And in the name of the power of youth, we will all run 400 laps around the training ground, Guy continued. Oh no, Takahashi, who had just finished the first 300 laps, whispered wearily. No, Guy-sensei, Lee cheerfully objected. We will run 500 laps around the training ground. Yes. Over the past year, Rock had changed. If before he had looked like Guy only in his eyes and eyebrows, now he was an exact copy of his teacher. Lee now wore a green tight-fitting suit, yellow leggings that hid the weights and the protector on his belt. Instead of uneven shoulder-length hair, he now had a bowl cut. And the boy adopted his invariable phrase about the power of youth. You are right, my student. Let's run. And Guy was the first to rush forward. Yes. Lee was delighted and rushed after the teacher. Yee! The others responded languidly. So where are they? Haruno stamped her foot angrily. How would I know? Uchiha answered coldly. It was already 10 o'clock in the morning, but neither Naruko nor Kakashi had come. Although Sakura liked the fact that none of them had come, and she could spend time with Sasuke-kun, she did not like being late. Finally, a dot appeared on the path that was quickly approaching them. And 2 minutes later, at this dot, they recognized Naruko, who was skipping towards them. You're late. Haruno pounced on her. So what? Uzumaki arched an eyebrow, plopping down on the ground. Kakashi didn't come. So I wasn't late, and unlike you, I got enough sleep and had breakfast. What? You disobeyed Sensei's order? Sakura loomed over Uzumaki, putting her hands on her hips. It wasn't an order, but a piece of friendly advice. Do you really think that students who just graduated from the academy would be sent to such a test? Naruto fell silent. Sakura was silent too. She had nothing to say. Not a single Kakashi team has ever taken this test. I was personally present at these tests. And I know one thing, no matter how hard we try to defeat him, we will still be too weak for him. The most important thing for us is to pass the second part of the test, not the first. I will not tell you the correct answer because otherwise we will not pass. What? What is the correct answer? Why can't you answer? The pink-haired girl interrupted her. I told you that I know everything about this test and was present every time others tried to pass it. The first stage is to defeat Kakashi. But he is a Jonin who masters the 4 elements. And we are too weak for him. Well, I can still fight him, but you, Sakura, won't be able to lay a finger on him during the fight. How could you? Haruno was indignant. Don't argue, you know it's true. Uzumaki closed her eyes. We'll fail the first part right away. But the second one is much easier than the first, but with a catch. If I answer, then we'll all go to the academy right away, since I know the correct answer, and that would be cheating. But if you or Sasuke answer, then we'll pass, Naruko explained and fell silent. Kakashi was approaching. Sorry for being late, I was just helping my granny cross the road, he scratched the top of his head. But let's move on to the test. Its essence, take these bells from me, he showed 2 silver bells. On the count of 3 you hide. 1, 2, 3. Begin! All 3 jumped in different directions. Sakura sat down by the rock, Sasuke and Naruko hid in the trees. Excellent. Hatake nodded and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. The test went quickly. Kakashi had Sasuke pinned in the ground, leaving his head sticking out. Sakura was first caught in a genjutsu, and then screamed throughout the forest. Naruko fought Hatake and managed to touch the bell, but was easily defeated after that. Hatake fought as if he wanted to kill the genin. Uzumaki realized one thing: when she trained with Kakashi, he gave in to her. And now the entire 7 team was sitting by 3 logs. Or rather, Sasuke and Naruko were sitting, and Sakura was tied to a log. Why am I tied? The pink-haired girl screamed, protesting by kicking her heels against the log. You showed yourself to be the weakest of all, Kakashi explained. One more thing. You all failed. Everyone worked on their own. And that's bad. Teamwork is what's important in a team. But I don't see any need to send you to the academy. But you will take the test again. After lunch. And now have lunch. However, don't give it to Sakura. And Kakashi disappeared. Naruto and Sasuke took their portions and opened them. There was a smell of fried meat. Sakura's stomach growled invitingly, causing the girl to blush in embarrassment. The Uchiha frowned, thinking about something. Here, Sasuke pulled his portion to her. What? But Haruno wanted to object. You're hungry. And you'll be of little use if you're hungry, because we have to work as a team to defeat Kakashi, the Sharingan carrier explained. Are you sure you want to break the order? Uzumaki narrowed her eyes. Yes, the boy nodded. Okay, Naruko nodded and picking up a piece of meat with chopsticks, shoved it into Sakura's mouth. Chew. As soon as Haruno chewed the first piece and swallowed it, Kakashi appeared in the clearing. You. He began menacingly. Passed. Hatake smiled with one eye. What? Haruno was surprised. You fed Sakura, your friend, breaking my order. Those who break the rules are trash. But those who abandon their friends are worse than trash, Kakashi sighed. All those genin who took the test before us didn't understand Kakashi's words. They didn't give their teammates food, fearing the consequences. Naruko looked up at the sky. But why didn't you disobey the order first? Haruno frowned. If I had been the first to offer you food, Sakura, then we would have failed. I swore that I would never reveal the trick to you too. I only helped you a little. And if Sasuke-kun hadn't guessed? The three of us would have had to sit in the academy for another year. Sakura exclaimed. You two would have had to sit there, and I wouldn't have been sent back to the academy. I can calmly ask the Hokage to transfer me to the third team. Moreover, Sasuke and I are too valuable to Konoha to sit in the academy. If anyone would have been sent there, it would have been only you, and Sasuke and I would have been given another person to replace you. Uzumaki sighed and stood up. A penalty of 300 laps at Guys was waiting for her. Chapter 10 New Mission. Or maybe a more difficult mission? Uzumaki asked. You haven't grown up to more difficult missions yet, the Hokage answered. Why? Naruto flared up, her eyes flashing angrily. I'm tired of these stupid garden beds and catching poor cats. Give me a more difficult mission. Naruto! Iruka was indignant, but the third interrupted him. Okay, Hiruzen nodded. I'm giving you a C-rank mission. You will have to escort one person to the Land of Waves. An old man wearing glasses, a sleeveless jacket, and baggy gray pants entered the office. He had glasses hanging on his nose, a towel around his neck, sandals on his feet, and a bottle of sake in his hands. The man smelled terribly of alcohol, which made everyone wrinkle their noses. Ugh! Kurama stuck out his tongue, catching the scent with Uzumaki's sense of smell. Agreed, Naruko answered mentally. And this little thing will accompany me? They are weak. Especially that blonde. Give me someone stronger. And you are stupid and stink, Uzumaki muttered, trying to maintain inner calm. So, Hatake spoke up. We'll gather at the Konoha gates in an hour. Yeah, Uzumaki muttered, leaving the Hokage's office and heading home. Uzumaki stood at the table and cut vegetables. Naruko, you're late, Hashirama announced, standing next to the girl. His gaze lingered on a piece of tomato dripping with juice, lying alone on the table. Reaching out his hand, he wanted to take it, when suddenly he got a slap on the hand. Raising his head, Senju saw angry blue eyes. Your portion is in the refrigerator. Don't steal someone else's. The blonde girl took the tomato and put it in a small box, which she then sealed in a scroll. Yuck! Hashirama stuck his tongue out at Naruko. Because of you, the tomato will suffer, slowly dying. Awawawawawa, the girl mimicked him, sticking out her tongue. Vaya 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 vaya, the brown-haired man repeated her movements, mimicking the blonde who was mimicking him. Vaya 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 vaya, the girl answered him. Maybe that's enough already? Kakashi leaned against the door frame, looking at the kindergarten. Silently envy, both stuck their tongues out at the ash-haired man, distracted from their fascinating activity. We're actually late, Hatake sighed. Yes, I know. Naruko answered, grabbing the scrolls, throwing them into her backpack and rushing to the hallway to put on her shoes. Let's go. She left the house and began to wait for Kakashi. Yeah, the ash-haired man nodded. And they walked along the streets of Konohagakure, cheerfully chatting about everything. In this rhythm, the girl and the man reached the village gates. Sasuke, Tazuna and Sakura were already standing there. Yo! Kakashi raised his hand, greeting them. You're late! Haruno exclaimed, pointing her finger at the newcomers. Ugh, Haruno! Where are your manners? The blue-eyed girl shook her head. Pointing and shouting is indecent. What do you know about decency? Haruno snorted. More than you, Uzumaki answered her. Enough! Hatake interrupted the beginning argument. Let's go on a mission already. The road to the Land of Waves was silent. Naruto went into her inner world to train, leaving Kurama to control her body. Sakura threw angry glances at the blonde, dreaming of showing her who was better. Sasuke was thinking about revenge again. Kakashi was reading his book and only occasionally giggled vulgarly when another vulgar scene appeared. Tazuna kept leaning towards the bottle, looking around worriedly. Suddenly, there was a clang of metal and a nasty giggle from behind. Turning around, Team 7 and the bridge builder saw two strange men in gray and black clothes with crossed-out Kirigakure protectors. Both were holding strange swords in their hands. "Give me the bridge builder," one of them said in a commanding tone, grinning nastily. "Why do you need him?" Hatake asked, not looking up from his book. But instead of answering, both missing Nin attacked the shinobi. Sakura watched in horror as the enemy, swinging, wanted to kill her. Haruno couldn't move from fear and, closing her eyes, prepared herself for pain. But instead, she heard the clang of metal. Carefully opening one eye, the pink-haired girl looked forward. Uzumaki stood in front of her, who, having pulled out a small katana from nowhere, blocked the blow and began to attack the enemy, wielding the weapon. "What are you standing there for?" the blue-eyed girl growled, turning to Haruno. "Protect Tazuna. I will deal with this shinobi myself." Uzumaki again turned her attention to the enemy, trying to injure him. Swinging, the girl brought down a blow on the missing Nin, making a distracting maneuver. However, he did not fall for her tricks and blocked the attack, putting his sword forward. Metal crashed onto metal, and sparks flew in all directions. Smirking, Naruko turned her body in the air and kicked her opponent in the face. The man staggered and, in order not to fall, took a couple of steps back. Blue-eyed immediately folded 5 seals and the missing Nin began to sink into the suddenly limp earth. When only his head remained on the surface, his body under the ground and the man himself could not move, Uzumaki turned around to see what her teammates were doing. Kakashi watched the students, mentally noting their successes and failures. Sakura stood with a kunai in front of Tazuna, ready to defend herself at any moment. Sasuke dealt the final blow to his opponent. When he fell to the ground, Hatake jumped up to him and sealed the unconscious body of the shinobi in a scroll. After that, he did the same procedure with the second missing Nin. "So what didn't you tell us?" the ash-haired man asked, turning to face the pale bridge builder. "I told you everything. I just need to be escorted to the land of waves and," he began to make excuses. "You shouldn't lie," Kakashi interrupted him. "Tell the truth." Well. It's," Tazuna mumbled, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a towel. "And if I don't mumble?" Uzumaki raised an eyebrow. "Good," the old man said doomedly. "The thing is, I'm being hunted by one of the richest ship owners in the world, Gato. He's not the man he seems. Gato is involved in drug trafficking and smuggling, and he makes a lot of money from it. A year ago, he seized control of all the trading companies in the land of waves through violence and financial fraud. And in our country, the one who rules the ships rules the treasury, the government, everything. We all live under the yoke of Gato's people. The only thing he's afraid of is the completion of the bridge. Then the islands and the mainland will have constant communication, and Gato will lose his main source of income, and his reign will come to an end. And the chief architect for the construction of the bridges is me. Why didn't you say so right away?" Haruno frowned. "The land of waves is a very poor country. Even our nobility sits without a penny in their pockets, not to mention the common people. I wouldn't have enough money to pay for a B-rank mission, so I had to hide the truth." "Well, if you abandon your mission, I will be killed. But what does it matter to you? What does it matter if my grandson bursts into tears? What does it matter to you if he cries and shouts, 'Grandpa! Where is my grandpa?' What do you care about my daughter, who will live a miserable life because I am the only breadwinner in the family, and will curse the Konoha shinobi for the fact that, I see," Kakashi interrupted him. "But we still have to return to Konoha in order to raise the rank of the mission there, and send more experienced shinobi to it." "No!" Naruto interrupted him. "We have to continue the mission. Otherwise, what kind of shinobi are we if we stop in the face of difficulties?" "She's right," the Uchiha suddenly spoke up. "We have to continue the mission. And what do you say, Sakura?" Hatake turned his gaze to the pink-haired girl. She mumbled and looked at her teammates for support. Seeing the determination in their eyes, she looked at Kakashi and timidly said, "We have to continue the mission. Then we will continue it. But I will still send the hawk to Konoha." Everyone agreed with Kakashi's decision. The ash-haired man took out a scroll and pulled out a brush, ink, paper, and a hawk. The bird pecked the man's hand in a friendly manner. Hatake quickly wrote out a few hieroglyphs and put the folded paper in a box on the bird's back. As soon as the hawk flew away, everyone continued on their way.